Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking into early 19th century Baltimore
Okay.
and really focusing on this guy, Thomas Poppleton, and his 1822 map of the city.
Sounds good.
A map that pretty much set the stage for how Baltimore developed over the next 100 years.
Wow.
And we're going to be drawing from this great article called Thomas Poppleton, The Map That Made Baltimore, which it really reads like a historical detective novel.
It's interesting.
Full of intrigue, rivalries, and even a little bit of revenge.
Sounds juicy.
Yeah, it is. And to help us navigate this whole story, we have with us a historian who specializes in urban development and mapping.
Happy to be here.
Great. So set the scene for us. Baltimore in the early 1800s. What's going on?
Well, picture this. It's this really bustling port city,
Okay.
just on the cusp of this huge boom.
Wow.
Fortunes being made left and right, risks taken every day,
Yeah.
the population just exploding.
Wow.
Baltimore was a city on the rise, definitely fueled by ambition and this, promise of opportunity.
I can imagine.
But in the midst of all this energy and growth, there was a pretty big problem. The city didn't have a reliable map.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, its boundaries were kind of fuzzy, and the streets were, not exactly laid out in any sort of organized way.
That sounds like a surveyor's nightmare.
Yeah, you could say that.
That's where Thomas Poppleton comes in, right?
Exactly. Poppleton was this English surveyor, pretty new to Baltimore,
Okay.
but he had this revolutionary approach to mapping. He really embraced this thing called triangulation, and he used this cutting-edge instrument called a theodolite.
Now, the article mentions triangulation a lot.
It does.
Can you explain why Poppleton's method was such a game changer, especially for a city like Baltimore?
Absolutely. See, before Poppleton,
Okay.
surveyors would rely on compasses and chains,
Okay.
literally measuring distances step by step,
Yeah.
which, worked okay for small areas.
Yeah.
But you can imagine over longer distances, errors would just pile up,
Right.
leading to maps that were, let's just say, not super accurate.
Not ideal.
Not at all. Poppleton, on the other hand, he based his approach on this network of carefully measured triangles.
Okay.
So by measuring the angles and sides of these triangles,
Right.
he could calculate the exact position of key points all across the city
Okay.
with incredible precision. And his theodolite,
Yeah.
that was this really sophisticated instrument for measuring angles,
I see.
allowed him to get this level of accuracy that nobody had seen before.
So he was bringing, the latest and greatest in surveying technology to Baltimore.
He was.
It makes you wonder, how did the old school surveyors react to all of this?
Well, let's just say they weren't exactly thrilled.
Right.
The article describes this clash
Yeah.
between the old guard who are comfortable with their traditional methods
Yeah.
and this newcomer with his, fancy instruments and scientific approach.
So basically, Poppleton was shaking things up.
Oh, absolutely. He faced resistance, even attempts to sabotage his work.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. From those who felt threatened by his methods and, I guess, maybe a little bit by his success, too.
So it sounds like there's a whole other story there.
Definitely.
This, professional rivalry, maybe even some personal animosity.
Yeah, could be.
But in the end, Poppleton gets it done, right?
He does.
He finishes the survey, publishes his map in 1822.
That's right.
It's not just any map, though, is it?
No, it's really something special. It's this masterpiece of accuracy and detail,
Yeah.
a real testament to his vision, skill, and just, sheer tenacity.
I can imagine.
This map would end up being the foundation for Baltimore's growth for generations.
That's incredible.
It really is.
Now, I know our listener is interested in East Baltimore.
Right.
Does the article talk about Poppleton's work in that area?
It does, yeah. The article highlights how Poppleton really meticulously laid out the streets of East Baltimore,
Good.
using his triangulation method to make sure everything was accurate. There's even this cool detail about his work in Fells Point, where he used a Methodist meeting house as a reference point for his survey.
Interesting.
It shows how he incorporated these existing landmarks into his calculations,
All right.
But it also hints at a possible personal connection to that church.
A little window into his life.
Exactly.
I love that. Now, before we get into the impact of this map, especially in East Baltimore,
Yeah, okay.
I think we need to unpack this thing the article calls Baltimore's block book system.
Right.
This seems key to Poppleton's legacy.
It is.
But I gotta admit, I don't really get how it worked.
Well, imagine trying to keep track of who owns what land
Yeah.
in a city that's growing so fast. It'd be a real mess, right?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Deeds all over the place, boundaries unclear,
Right.
disputes popping up constantly.
So how did Poppleton's map help solve this?
Well, his map, with its grid of streets and numbered blocks, all precisely defined.
Yeah.
It gave them the framework for this totally new system of keeping land records.
Okay.
Basically, they created this block book where they organized property ownership according to Poppleton's numbered blocks.
I see.
Made buying, selling, and keeping track of land so much easier and more transparent.
So it's like his map didn't just show where things were.
Right.
It became the backbone of the entire city's land ownership system.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this block book system, rooted in Poppleton's accurate map, shaped Baltimore's development for over a century. It's incredible how a map can become more than just lines on paper, you know?
Yeah, it becomes this administrative tool
It does.
that helps the city grow and almost like directs its destiny in a way.
Absolutely.
That's a really cool way to think about it. I'm really interested to learn more about the consequences of this system,
Okay.
both positive and maybe some unintended ones.
Yeah.
But I think that's a story for Deep Dives.
Oh.
Part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
For now, I think we'll leave our listeners with this. A map isn't just lines on paper.
Right.
It can be a seriously powerful force in shaping how a city grows and changes.
I completely agree.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the story of Thomas Poppleton and his map that shaped Baltimore. We left off talking about how Poppleton's meticulous map formed the basis for the city's block book system of land records.
Right.
And I think it's just amazing how this seemingly simple idea,
Yeah.
organizing ownership by city block,
Right.
had such a long-lasting impact on Baltimore's development.
It really is a testament to just how powerful a well-designed system can be, the block book system, rooted in the accuracy of Poppleton's map.
Right.
Streamlined land transactions, reduced disputes, and provided a clear framework for city planning. It's no exaggeration to say that it played a major role in Baltimore's transformation from, a chaotic port town into a modern city.
Yeah, for sure. The article also mentions that this system, while innovative, wasn't without its consequences.
Right.
Something about ground rents causing complications.
Yeah, that's right. The ground rent system in Baltimore back then, it added another layer of complexity to land ownership. Developers would often lease land for long periods, sometimes even 99 years.
Wow.
And then build on it. This meant that the land and the buildings on it had separate owners.
Right.
Which could create this tangled web of rights and responsibilities.
So you're trying to trace back the ownership of a property.
Right.
But you have to consider both the building and the land it's on, each with its own history of transactions, potentially multiple owners.
It gets complicated.
Yeah.
It could become a real challenge.
Especially as time goes on.
Yeah.
And the original leases, the agreements, get passed down through generations or change hands multiple times.
Absolutely. The block book system, while efficient for tracking land ownership, it didn't really solve the problems that came with ground rent.
It didn't untangle that web.
No. In fact, you could argue that Poppleton's precise map, by providing this clear framework for recording land ownership, might have actually made the spread of this ground rent system easier.
Interesting. So even the best intentions can have unintended consequences.
It happens all the time.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Poppleton's later career.
Okay.
After the success of his 1822 map,
Yeah.
what else did he work on?
Well, the article highlights a couple of interesting projects that show how adaptable he was and how he stayed involved in shaping Baltimore's infrastructure.
Interesting. Like what?
One of them was this proposed canal
Okay.
that would connect the Susquehanna River to Baltimore.
Canals were a big deal back then.
Oh, yeah. Huge in the early 19th century.
Yeah.
Seen as, like, the key to economic growth, connecting markets, opening new trade routes.
Exactly.
And Poppleton, always the meticulous surveyor, was tasked with surveying the route for this ambitious project.
Wow.
So even though the canal never actually got built, we still have this beautiful map of the proposed route.
Really?
Drawn by a local printer named Fielding Lucas, who based his work on Poppleton's surveys and elevation measurements.
So Poppleton's work lives on, even though the project itself failed.
Exactly. It shows the lasting value of accurate surveys, right?
Yeah.
How data collected for one purpose can be used in totally unexpected ways later on.
Yeah, that's really cool. What else? What other projects?
Well, in the 1830s, Poppleton got involved in another big project, surveying the route for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad's main line on Pratt Street.
Wow, the B&O Railroad.
Yeah, this was a huge moment for Baltimore.
Oh, I bet.
Railroads were becoming the dominant mode of transportation,
Of course.
revolutionizing commerce, connecting cities in ways that had never been possible.
It's amazing how Poppleton's career
Yeah,
really mirrors Baltimore's own evolution.
it really does.
He goes from mapping the city itself
Right.
to surveying these routes for canals and railroads.
He was involved in almost every major infrastructure project that shaped Baltimore in the early 1800s.
That's incredible. So did he get recognition for all this work?
He did, in a way. Although the original surveys for the B&O Railroad are gone,
Okay.
there's a lasting tribute to Poppleton's contribution.
What was that?
Poppleton Street. It runs right alongside the Mount Clair Station and B&O Roundhouse.
He finally gets a street named after him.
He does.
And what a fitting tribute,
Right.
considering his work on one of the most important technological advancements of the 19th century.
Definitely.
Okay.
But, the article also mentions that despite all his success, Poppleton didn't die a wealthy man.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
You'd think someone who played such a key role in Baltimore's development
Right.
would have been set for life.
You'd think so. It's not entirely clear why.
Okay.
But the article suggests that he might have had trouble adapting to how Baltimore and the surveying profession were changing.
I see.
As the city grew, technology advanced.
Right.
Newer, faster surveying methods probably came along,
Makes sense.
making Poppleton's meticulous triangulation-based approach less in demand.
So even the most skilled professionals can struggle to keep up sometimes.
It happens.
It's a bit of a bittersweet note to end on.
Yeah.
But I think it adds another dimension to Poppleton's story.
Definitely.
It reminds us that even behind these maps, these grand projects,
Right.
there are real human lives.
With their own triumphs and struggles.
Exactly. It also highlights that history isn't always a neat and tidy narrative of progress.
No, not at all.
It's full of complexities,
Yes.
unexpected turns,
Right.
and individuals who, despite their contributions, maybe get forgotten or face challenges in their own time.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get too melancholy here,
Yeah.
let's appreciate what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We've seen how Poppleton's map
Yeah.
wasn't just a visual representation of Baltimore,
Right.
but a tool that shaped its development,
Huh.
influenced its land ownership system, and facilitated the growth of its infrastructure.
It's a fascinating example of how one map
Yeah.
can have such a profound and multifaceted impact on a city's destiny.
It really is. And in part 3,
We'll explore one final aspect of Poppleton's legacy
okay?
that I think our listener will find particularly captivating.
Sounds good.
We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Thomas Poppleton, the surveyor whose map, shaped Baltimore's destiny.
It's pretty amazing.
We've explored his arrival in the city, his groundbreaking use of triangulation,
Right.
his involvement in those huge infrastructure projects like canals and railroads.
Yeah, he really did it all.
Now, for this final part, I want to go back to his 1822 map and its lasting impact.
Okay, sure.
The article mentions how the block book system, which was based on Poppleton's map,
Right.
remained in use well into the 20th century.
It did, yeah.
It's incredible how long that system lasted.
It really is. It shows how forward-thinking Poppleton's work was.
Yeah.
His map provided this really clear and consistent way to record land ownership,
Yeah.
which was just invaluable as Baltimore grew and changed.
Yeah, can you imagine the mess without it?
Oh, it would have been chaos. All those disputes, all those records.
Exactly.
It would have been a nightmare.
So, beyond just land records, what other lasting impacts did Poppleton's map have on Baltimore, especially in East Baltimore, the area our listener is interested in?
Well, think about it this way. Poppleton's map basically provided the blueprint for how Baltimore developed.
Okay.
That grid of streets, the numbered blocks,
Yeah.
it influenced where buildings went up,
Yeah.
how people moved through the city.
And in East Baltimore.
In East Baltimore, those streets he so carefully surveyed, even the ones around Fells Point where he used that Methodist meeting house,
Right.
they became the heart of this growing community.
So it's not just lines on a map.
No, not at all.
His work had a real impact.
Definitely. Even today, when you walk through East Baltimore,
Yeah.
you're walking through a landscape that reflects Poppleton's vision.
Wow.
His legacy isn't just in some history book.
Right.
It's in the very streets of the city.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
I wonder what Poppleton would think if he could see Baltimore today.
That's a great question. To see this bustling city,
Yeah.
the skyscrapers,
Mhm.
the traffic, all flowing in a way that he helped to shape.
Almost 200 years ago.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the power of human ingenuity
It does.
and how our ideas, even the ones captured in something as simple as a map,
Yeah.
can have these ripple effects that last for generations.
That's a really beautiful way to put it, and it's a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive, I think.
I agree.
We've explored the life and work of Thomas Poppleton,
Right.
a man whose contributions to Baltimore are often overlooked,
Definitely.
but whose legacy is literally part of the streets we walk on.
It's been a pleasure uncovering this hidden part of Baltimore's history with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to take a closer look at the maps around you. Every map tells a story about the people, the places, the events that shape the world we live in. So the next time you see a map, take a moment to think about all the layers of history it holds, and the people, like Thomas Poppleton, whose vision helped to chart our course. Until next time, happy exploring.